What is your emergency?
Yeah. I need an ambulance. Lots of
You need an ambulance?
Yes, please.
What's your name, sir?
Henri Van Breda.
And you, the patient?
No, my family is. Someone attacked my family.
Hey?
Someone has attacked my family in my house.
Okay, so you need the police or the ambulance.
And an ambulance, please. Yes.
Now, who is injured?
I think everyone.
Everyone in your house?
Everyone, 4 people, yes.
Adults, 2 adults?
2 adults and 3 adults and 1 teenage girl, yes.
What are the injuries?
Head injuries.
Are they conscious?
I don't think so. My sister's moving, but that's it.
Are there any suspects on scene?
No, they ran away.
With what were they attacked?
An axe. I think I blacked out and I've just woken up.
20-year-old Henri is on the phone with emergency services. He's calling for help, saying an intruder broke into his family's home and attacked everyone with an axe. But for someone who just witnessed a violent crime, he sounds bizarrely calm.
Okay, what kind of injuries is there?
My family and we were attacked by a guy with an axe.
With an axe? Unconscious, it is. Unconscious, huh?
Yes, and bleeding from the head, please.
Was that a giggle? When paramedics and police finally walked into the house a few hours later, nothing could have prepared them for the bloodbath waiting for them inside. Upstairs, Henri's older brother Rudi was dead in his bed. His father Martin was found right there inside Rudi's bedroom, slumped over his son's bed. And from the position of his body, it looked like he was desperately trying to save his boy when he himself was attacked from behind. His mother, Teresa, who was also hacked to death, lay near the bedroom doorway. Right next to her was 16-year-old Marli. Remarkably, Marli was still alive, but she was bleeding out, barely clinging to life. Investigators immediately started looking for evidence of a break-in. But in an estate this exclusive, that was really hard to fathom. They checked the perimeter, they looked for cut fences, smashed windows, broken locks, and they found nothing. And that's when the question started. If the electric fences were live and the biometric gates were locked, how did an axe-wielding madman get inside? How did he slip past 24-hour patrols completely undetected, and how did he vanish into thin air without leaving a single trace behind? Slowly, a terrifying realization began to set in. What if the horror hadn't come from the outside at all? As police looked around that bloody house, their eyes fell on the only family member left virtually unscathed, 20-year-old Henri. And they had to ask themselves, who really wielded the axe that night?
Marli van Breda was a multi-millionaire businessman who'd built an impressive international empire in real estate and education. We're talking an estimated net worth of over $16 million. His wife, Teresa, was elegant, totally dedicated to her family, and together they had 3 kids. There was 21-year-old Rudi, who was the golden boy, a brilliant postgraduate student with a bright future ahead of him, and 16-year-old Marli, a popular high school kid. And then there was 20-year-old Henri. Henri was very much the black sheep of this high-achieving family. While his brother excelled, Henri struggled. He had dropped out of his science degree in Australia, he was battling a severe drug addiction, and he was largely drifting through life on his parents' dime. In a household defined by perfection and immense pressure to succeed, Henri was the outlier. He was the one who didn't fit the mold. Now, after living out in Australia for a few years, the family decided to move back to South Africa. they ended up buying house number 12 at the De Zalze Golf Estate in Stellenbosch. Now, De Zalze isn't just a nice luxury neighborhood. In a country with high crime rates, De Zalze is a fortress for the ultra-wealthy. It promises absolute safety. The entire estate is surrounded by a high-voltage electric fence. You need biometric fingerprint scans just to get through the gates. There are 24-hour armed patrols cycling the perimeter and infrared security cameras monitoring every single inch of the boundary. And on the night of January 26, 2015, the security logs showed the fence was fully alive. No alarms went off, the guards didn't see anything weird. The Van Breda family went to sleep that night feeling perfectly secure, totally locked away from the dangers of the outside world, completely oblivious to the danger lurking inside.
On the morning of January 27, 2015, the sun began to rise over the wine valleys of Stellenbosch, casting a warm light over the pristine estate. But inside house number 12, a clock was ticking. A clock that would completely dismantle Henri Van Breda's innocence. According to forensic experts, the brutal attacks on the Van Breda family took place somewhere in the dark early morning hours. It was a whirlwind of sheer, bloody violence, yet the first call to emergency services wasn't placed until 7:12 a.m. So for nearly 3 agonizing hours, Henri Van Breda did not call for help. Instead, he waited, he watched, and he went to work. If you walked into that house during those missing hours, you wouldn't have found a terrified young man desperately trying to save his dying family. Instead, police believe, you would have witnessed a meticulous, cold-blooded cleanup operation. First, Henri went into the kitchen. He took a knife and carefully sliced his own chest and arms. Medical experts would later testify these wounds were superficial, perfectly symmetrical, and classic examples of self-inflicted injuries designed to look like he fought off an attacker. Then, he went to the bathroom. He washed the heavy layers of his family's blood off his skin, making sure to leave just enough on his shorts to look like a victim. But it's what Henri did next that defies all human logic. With his brother and father dead upstairs, and his mother and teenage sister choking on their own blood in the hallway, he didn't run to the neighbor's house. He didn't scream for the estate guards. Instead, Henri picked up his mobile phone. He didn't dial 01000 for the police, and he didn't dial an ambulance. Instead, at 4:24 a.m., Henri opened his phone and looked up the number for his girlfriend. He called her, she didn't answer. He didn't try calling her again, and he also didn't try calling anyone else. Instead, Henri logged into a digital mapping app and calmly searched for the locations of local hospitals, seemingly with no urgency and absolutely no panic. By the time he finally dialed emergency services at 7:12 a.m., his sister Marli had been bleeding from a severed jugular vein for nearly 3 hours. Now, when prosecution later asked Henri on the witness stand why he waited so long to call for help, his excuse left the courtroom completely speechless. He claimed that after witnessing the brutal slaughter of his entire family, he was so traumatized that he simply fainted on the bathroom floor and slept through the morning. But the police weren't buying it. The timeline didn't lie, and the digital footprint Henri left behind that morning was about to seal his fate.
To the police, Henri Van Breda's survival wasn't a miracle. It was an impossibility. When detectives began pulling at the threads of his timeline, Henri knew he needed an explanation. He needed a story that could explain the bloodbath upstairs while leaving him untouched. What he gave them was a tale so bizarre it sounded like the plot of a badly written horror film. Henri claimed that in the early hours of the morning he went to the upstairs bathroom. While inside, he heard strange noises coming from the bedroom he shared with his brother Rudi. He opened the bathroom door just a crack. Through that narrow gap, Henri claimed he watched a nightmare unfold. Standing over Rudi's bed was a tall, well-built man dressed in dark clothes. gloves, and a homemade balaclava with frayed eye holes, who Henri described as masked, black, and Afrikaans speaking. In his hands, the intruder held a heavy axe. But it wasn't just the weapon that made Henri's blood run cold, it was the sound the man was making. As the blade hacked down into Rudi's sleeping body, Henri claimed the attacker was laughing, giggling hysterically, like he was having the time of his life. Hearing the commotion, Henri's father, Martin, rushed into the room to save his son. The laughing axeman turned on him, striking him down instantly. Next came his mother, Teresa, and his sister, Marli, who were attacked on the landing outside. And through it all, Henri said he stood perfectly still in the bathroom. He was too paralyzed by fear to scream, too terrified to help. But then, the phantom killer noticed him. Henri claimed the laughing man walked slowly towards him, but instead of another swift, brutal execution, a bizarre struggle ensued. Henri, the untrained university dropout, claimed he somehow managed to rather easily wrestle the heavy axe away from the seasoned killer. Desperate, the intruder allegedly pulled out a knife, stabbed Henri superficially in the torso, and fled down the stairs with Henri in hot pursuit. Henri even claimed he threw the axe at the fleeing shadow, missed, fell down the stairs, and eventually blacked out. It was a cinematic, action-packed defense. But when prosecutor Susan Galloway stepped up to cross-examine Henri, she systematically tore it to pieces. If this phantom attacker was a cold-blooded killer who had just wiped out an entire family in minutes, why did he suddenly become weak and clumsy when facing Henri? Why did he leave a strong adult male alive behind him to attack the woman outside? And most damning of all, if a gang of intruders had broken into a billionaire's estate to commit a home invasion, why didn't they take anything? On the kitchen table right next to where Henri claimed he chased the killer sat expensive laptops and luxury handbags, completely untouched. The house hadn't been ransacked, no alarms had tripped, and the family dog, Sasha, who barked furiously at any stranger, hadn't made a single sound all night. The prosecution put it to Henri directly. There was no laughing man in a balaclava. There were no phantom intruders. The only person wielding the axe that night was the person who was now standing on the witness stand.
When the trial finally began in the Western Cape High Court, the world watched as a mild-mannered, quiet young man stepped into the dock. Henri Van Breda did not look like an axe murderer. He looked like a victim. But inside the courtroom, prosecutor Susan Galloway was about to strip that mask away. The state didn't have a smoking gun, a confession, or even an eyewitness. But what they did have was science, and the forensic evidence spoke louder than Henri ever could. First, there was the blood. Blood spatter experts testified the patterns on Henri's shorts were damning. He didn't have transfer stains from hugging his dying family. He had impact splatter. The microscopic droplets proved he was standing directly over his brother Rudi and his father Martin as the heavy axe broke through their skulls. Then came the wounds on Henri's own body. He claimed he fought for his life against a knife-wielding giant, but medical experts testified that the cuts were shallow, perfectly symmetrical, and entirely within arm's reach. They were textbook self-inflicted injuries. He had sliced his own skin to build an alibi, while his family bled out on the floorboards above. And finally, the state brought out the weapons. The axe and the kitchen knife used in the massacre didn't come from a mysterious gang. They belonged to the Van Breda household. And by June 2018, Judge Rudi van Breda had heard enough. In a scathing, detailed judgment, he systematically dismantled Henri's version of events, calling it untenable. He noted that Henri had shown a total lack of empathy throughout the whole trial, and Judge Desai sentenced Henri Van Breda to 3 life terms for the murders of his parents and brother, 15 years for the attempted murder of his sister, and an additional year for obstructing justice. To the justice system, the case was officially closed. The monster was behind bars, but outside the prison walls, the ripples of that night were far from over.
There were 2 women left in the wake of the tragedy, both bound to Henri but living in completely different realities. The first was 16-year-old Marli. Marli was the ultimate enigma of the trial. She had miraculously survived having her skull fractured and her jugular vein severed. She was the only living eyewitness to the horror inside house number 12. The police desperately needed her to tell them who had held the axe. But Marli couldn't. The severe trauma to her brain left her with retrograde amnesia. She had absolutely no memory of the attack or the hours leading up to it. She remembered her family and she knew who Henri was, but the morning of January 27, 2015 was a total black hole. She never testified against her brother because in her mind, the night simply did not exist. But while his sister lived in the dark, another woman chose to step into Henri's corner. Her name was Danielle Janse van Rensburg. Despite the horrific allegations, the gory crime scene photos, and the mountains of forensic evidence, Danielle fiercely championed his innocence. She sat in the gallery during his trial holding his hand during breaks. When the media branded him as psychopath, she gave interviews calling him gentle, loving, and kind. Even after Judge Desai handed Henri 3 life sentences, Danielle's faith did not waver. She publicly stated that the police had framed him, that the real killers were still out there, and she vowed to stand by him through every failed appeal. To this day, while Henri sits in a maximum security prison, she remains the believer who refuses to accept that the boy she loves is the monster of De Zalze.
The story of the Van Breda family is a chilling reminder that the greatest terrors aren't always lurking outside in the shadows. Sometimes they sit right next to us at the dinner table. Martin and Teresa Van Breda built an empire to give their children everything wealth could buy. They bought a home inside a literal fortress, paying millions for the ultimate promise of absolute safety. But no electric fence, biometric scanner, or armed patrol could protect them from the resentment brewing in their own upstairs hallway. Today, Rudi, Martin, and Teresa rest in a family grave. Marli Van Breda continues to heal away from the public eye, carrying physical scars of a night her mind refuses to let her remember. And Henri Van Breda sits in a maximum security prison cell, serving out 3 life terms and stripped of the millions he slaughtered his family to inherit. The gates of De Zalze still stand, keeping the outside world at bay, but the ghost of house number 12 remains a permanent monument to a perfect family, a monstrous act, and the 3 missing hours that exposed a killer.
To this day, no motive was ever formally established, and under South African criminal law, none was required. When Judge Desai delivered his 5-hour judgment, he was explicit. This court does not speculate about motive or intention. In South Africa, the state only needs to prove that the accused committed the act and that they intended to do so. The why is irrelevant to guilt. But outside that courtroom, investigators, journalists, and the public couldn't let it go and created their own theories. We want to reiterate that none of these theories were ever formally tested or accepted as evidence in court. The most reported theory centers on Henri's drug use. Reports alleged he had a severe tic or methamphetamine addiction and had spent time at a rehabilitation center in Cape Town just a year before the murders. Tic is strongly linked to paranoia, aggression, and catastrophic decision-making. Reports alleged that Martin and Teresa had cut off Henri's allowance entirely because of it. For someone dependent on drugs and dependent on his parents for everything, his home, his lifestyle, his entire financial existence, the door slamming shut may have felt unsurvivable. Then there is the inheritance angle. Martin's estate was worth millions and Henri stood to benefit. Henri tried to make it look like an intruder committed these murders and therefore he would have legally been the sole inheritor. If that was his intent, obviously, that backfired completely. Under South African law, no person can profit from their own crime. Marli, the sister he left bleeding on the hallway floor, inherited the entire family fortune. Henri received nothing. And then there is another detail that is worth considering. Rudi was attacked first. Not his father, not his mother, Rudi, the golden boy who seemed to effortlessly embody everything Henri could not. Given the brutal and up-close nature of the crimes, we believe this was an act of passion, and Rudi might have been the one who fueled that flame of anger the most. What we are left with is not one motive, but many threads: addiction, financial desperation, resentment, and the crushing weight of being the one who never belonged. It could have been one or all of these theories at once. Henri Van Breda sat through 68 days of trial with a chilling emotional flatness, calmly reenacting the attack as though recounting a story that had nothing to do with him. He has never spoken publicly about why. And whatever he is carrying it alone. And as long as he remains silent in that maximum security cell, the question of why will remain the darkest, most unresolved mystery of De Zalze.
Before you go, if you want to explore more true crime stories and case breakdowns, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button. We look at the facts, the timelines, and the court evidence behind major cases, and your support helps us bring you more episodes just like this one. We would love to hear your thoughts on this story, so please drop a comment in the comment section below. Other than that, thank you for watching, and we will see you again next week.